Okay, hello, welcome to tonight's show. It looks like we're still having connections issues, so this might be a YouTube only later show and or on Spotify. For those of you that are watching this, sorry if it's jumpy. At least you'll get to see it later. Catch up what you miss on YouTube or Spotify. All right, so welcome tonight. I am joined by a slew of guests. I'm going to have them introduce themselves in a second. Tonight's topic is table rules outside the games we play. So we're going to be talking a lot about social cues and other non-system related rules that you might have at your house, the reasons for having them, all that kind of fun stuff. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our two star guests and our regular community guests. So we're going to start ladies first. Liz, please tell us who you are, what you do. Give us a little pitch about your stuffs.
Hi, so I'm Dr. Liz Shuler, and I am a mind-body transformational coach. I work with people who want to create a better life for themselves, people who feel stuck, people who feel like they're not worth enough. I'm there to help guide them and get them to the place that they really want to be. I currently live in Europe, but I've lived all over the world. I'm from Wyoming, small town, so I'm just here to have a good time and talk about social cues.
Nice. Before we move on, do you have anything else you want to pitch, talk, anything about your business that you need to share with us? They should be excited for to hear more about at the end of the show.
Yeah, I am on Insight Timer, which is a meditation app. It's completely free to use for most of the features. So if you want to meditate or have, a chill session where you can relieve some stress, I've got a bunch of meditations up there.
Awesome. Fantastic. All right, jumping over to our other star guest, JP, Mr. Marsh. Fill us in. Who you are, what you do.
My name is JP Marsh. I am a co-parenting relationship coach and advocate and speaker, mostly for healthy co-parenting relationships. I'm a 40-year-old single girl dad and have gone from a place of super conflict to collaboration, whereas we do the holidays together, do the school stuff, the sports stuff, the summer barbecues, me, her boyfriend, his family, and it's no big deal, which is less common than it should be, but it's a lot better of a situation for sure. Anxiety, stress, depression, it doesn't come into play as much for just constantly being at somebody's throat or raising your kids in an environment to be weapons or spies or having to choose one or the other or listen to one constantly be negative towards the other and all that good stuff.
Fantastic. I think you're gonna have plenty of input on tonight's topic, so I'm super excited for it. And not last but not least, Brandon, go ahead, since this is your first time on the actual podcast, go ahead and give us a quick intro, super fast. You get 5 words. No, just kidding.
All right. Well, not as cool as these guys, but no, quick intro. My name's Brandon Webb. I'm in Erie, PA. Originally from Florida. Moved up here a couple years ago for my family, be with my daughter. I've been doing D&D and Pathfinder since I was 8 years old. I used to be a D&D coach for a long time, teaching new people how to come into the system and walk them into it without them getting overwhelmed. And on a day-to-day basis, I'm a landscape business owner. So that's about it for me.
Fantastic. Now we have all that information. It'll be on the interwebs forever. Okay, so let's get into tonight's topic. So we're going to first define what table rules are and what they're for, how they can be used, all that fun stuff, right? And table rules is really just a catch-all for anything that isn't built into whatever manual that you are playing with. So depending on the system that you're playing, the people you're playing with, it can change from table to table, even with the same people. And so some of them are social cues. One of the big ones is like bringing food to the D&Ds. So just down a first right off the bat question for the three of you, and I'm just going to go in order of who is seen on my screen where. Do you think it's okay to bring food to a table, and why and why not? What would be the goods and the bads of bringing food to a D&D or Liz? You said you played something besides D&D. What's the system you play?
Yeah, so I am a forever GM for Dungeon World, which is
Okay.
more of a narrative base. Yeah. So anytime that we play, it's like a potluck. It's dinner, lunch. We all bring everything that we want to eat, snacks, because it's kind of a marathon session. Sometimes we can play up to 8 hours. So if you're not allowed to bring food to the table, that would be very bad.
Nice. Okay, so jumping over to Dwayne because you're next on my camera. What's your thoughts on food? Good, bad, uglies.
Me or him? I'm completely missed.
Dweeb, that's you.
Okay, sorry. So I'm with food. I used to not be because people would either be sloppy, especially when I brought on my homes. But then finding you have the right group of people and it's
Right.
more organized and you have people who are respectful, then it's a go-to. I used to be the DM that would buy pizza, bring chips, make stuff. Wife would make cookies. So, and it kind of lightens the field, especially when people come in and they know, hey, if we're running late at night, you could let them know you don't have to grab dinner. You can come here. We have dinner ready.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
All right, and last but not least, JP. What about you? What are your thoughts on food in a social situation like that?
Well, I mean, nobody wants to be around somebody that's hangry. You know what I mean? Or anything like that. I guess to an extent, it would just kind of depend on the time of day, the hours that you'd be playing. Like if it's going to be through a dinner time, then maybe do more of a food kind of deal. But if it's 7 p.m. or later or 3 p.m. something like that, leading into like a dinner deal, it'd be more like chips and salsa or you know snacks. More so than full on meals or big food kind of stuff. I mean, even if it's just a couple bags of string cheese or in the fridge, and some crackers or something like that. It doesn't necessarily have to be something like elaborate to where everybody has to have a bunch of plates and you got to do a bunch of cleanup. If you're doing a game and not a barbecue, I mean, there's no real reason to have a big feast.
I don't know what you're talking about. Every gaming
may I add
session.
something real
Of
quick?
course, yeah. It's a conversation, not a turn order.
Oh, yeah. All I was going to say is players who are listening, always keep your GMs fed. They might reward you later,
See, okay,
even if it's a cookie.
you bring up a fantastic thing, which is bribe the DM, right? So this is a joke usually at my tables. Uh, bring food for the DM, even if it's something small that they don't necessarily have to eat there, right? Because honestly, as a GM DM, there's a lot of time where you're just talking and doing stuff, and you don't actually have a ton of time to shove food in your face. So
Yep.
for some extra table rules to make things A, more organized, and B, better for everyone, set expectations, right? Having rules that are like no sodas at the table, they have to be somewhere else, so they don't get spilled on the miniatures. If you roll dice or someone flips the table because they get angry, whatever, you know what I mean? Make sure that you know your group and how they're playing. And what will happen if you got a cat that loves to jump on things and slap things around? Like, yeah, that's the random monster that jumps on the table from the time to time. Make sure your food isn't where the random monster can get it. This also applies for children and things like that. If you are having more of a meal, it is a fantastic way to structure breaks into your game and be like, hey, let's go have our pizza. Or, oh, hey, we can do whatever else, right? And you guys can have that social connection thing where you get to step away from the table. So, focusing on that aspect where you're not necessarily playing the games, um, what are your guys' thoughts and opinions on the importance of that time where you're not necessarily gaming, but you're having like communal get together time? So, I'm going to start with JP on this one and do reverse order.
Well, I mean, I grew up. I grew up in AA. Like my dad quit drinking when I was very young, and so just like the AA meetings that would always kind of run, you would go for a while, and then you'd have breaks where people would be able to go outside and smoke a cigarette if they smoked, or get a drink or whatever, and that was when everybody was talking and connecting to everybody. So as long as everybody's okay with it and it's not in the middle of something pressing or anything like that, calling timeout or having breaks or being able to kind of step away for a minute, but not have it to where it starts getting unorganized, where one person's having to sneak out, and then all of a sudden everybody's waiting for them, or they kind of disrupt the game because they're missing, or however. I for a long time in my early 20s I played poker, and you couldn't. They'd outlawed smoking in the bars, but all card games, all tournaments and everything were in places you couldn't smoke. So then you're always trying to find the best time to run out there. And it never failed that when you came back in, everybody at the table sitting there staring at you because it's your turn and they can't do anything for you. So having a little bit of structure, but still like loosely having the structure is probably the way to go, I would guess.
So you actually bring up a really good topic that is when someone is away, right? And now this is a big table rule. One of the things that I have found that I do not like in the D&D realm is some professional GMs will have what's called bathroom tokens. And I hate the idea of bathroom tokens.
Oh,
And they are literal currency that you get to use at the table to go to the bathroom. And it's supposedly to prevent people from wasting a whole bunch of time playing on their phone in the bathrooms and all that kind of stuff. Like, in essence, it's a good idea. In practice, if you do this, you're a terrible DM, and I will not stop saying that. Because it's really disconnected. So I'm going to jump over to Liz as kind of a segue here onto this thing. What did your take on that short bit of information for that?
I had like a visceral reaction. I've worked as an international school counselor. I work as an international school counselor for a long time. And, I don't even like it when kids have to ask to go to the bathroom. So having adults have to ask to go to the bathroom during a game just feels way too much like, school, prison. I don't want my games to feel that way. I just want to have, when I'm running my game, if somebody has to go to the bathroom, it's like, okay, we, take a quick break, go to the bathroom, come back, no big deal.
Now,
so,
what about in a professional setting? You know what I mean? So if you're dealing with a client, this could also apply to you, JP.
Right.
How is that best handled? Now, obviously, I know where I stand on this. Let the person go to the bathroom and come back and talk to them. But do you guys have like, hey, we have a 45-minute session. If you're not there for 10 minutes because you suddenly had to use the restroom, how do you make up for that?
For me, I mean, most of my clients know that, we have that set time together. If they're going to have, an issue, because I do deal with people with chronic illnesses, and some of those can, be gastric, those sorts of things. So normally I'll just tack on a little bit extra on the next session or figure out, I'm flexible. But if you have to go to the bathroom, like, I'm not going to, are you going to pee your pants at the table or sitting across? Like, I'm not going to police bathrooms at all, ever.
Okay, good. We're all on the same track here. All right, Dwayne, you look like you had a couple things to say.
Yeah, sorry. I actually have a. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
So I actually have a couple house rules for this one, since this is all about house rules as well. So I have a house rule for when people are wanting to leave the table in the middle of the game. Let's say they're in a battle sequence, the other players are talking to a big character, and there's stuff going on, but somebody has to get up and go. And I know they're going to be gone for a little bit. I give them an option, and they know this way before the game ever starts. They either have an option of player limbo or player autopilot. And what the options are is autopilot is I take over their character for a small period of time until they return, and I play their character based on how they play their characters, because I study, it's a lot of work, so I don't recommend it for every GM out there. I study all my characters' character sheets. I watch them how they play. I take notes on how they play as they're playing their characters. So if they do choose that option, I can play their character to the best role. But I do it in a minimum circumstance, meaning I choose the most least lethal circumstance that they could do to keep their character safe. Or they can choose limbo, where the character's there, but decided to be mute for a period. Meaning even if they're in battle, it just kind of skips their turn. Their character, instead of fighting, runs, tries to hide and leave the area. And it kind of gives that balance to where players aren't having to wait for that character to come back in and start playing their character, and they're not waiting 10, 15, 30 minutes. It keeps the game rolling, and then when they get back, I just catch them up. Hey, your character just ran real quick. Or, they helped dialogue the scenario and got them through. And it usually works out very well. I don't ever have players complain about it. I hate the tokens. I had to make that comment about that. I hate the token. I had a DM that did that, and I threw the tokens back at him, and I said, if I'm gonna go to the bathroom, I'm just gonna go. Just take over my character. I don't care. Like I feel like that's just too much of elementary school. Like if you're all grown adults playing a game, just get up and go. Everybody's gonna respect it. Nobody's gonna get mad at you, and if somebody really does, then it can be worked out at a later date.
So I'm going to come back on
As
this
for
a
the
second.
original question,
Original question. Go ahead.
okay. Well, the original question is like gatherings, meeting up, stuff like that. Online, I did this a lot. Snow, who's been in the chat, knows this. And Rick, you see me do this when I run my games. I like to meet up with my players at least once or twice a week, get everybody together. And online, it's more of just social chatting. It's so everybody can get to know each other, because obviously not everybody online is going to know each other. In person, I play Magic the Gathering, or we'll do movies. I'll invite all my players over, and we would do stuff like play Magic, talk, hang out. I'll order some pizza, or maybe we won't even have any food. I got a VR system. We've done that before with a group, but I'll get everybody together and get them in a social interaction. So they have to kind of like, you put them in that field where they get to be more comfortable to open up.
Nice.
And that's the best place to do, especially for you GMs who are out there running in-person games and you're worried about players not liking each other. Find interactions that don't involve those games, don't involve your tabletop. You can do things like bring the journals in, have everybody bring their character sheets, talk about it, go over rules together, or anything to help the situation. If they don't want to yet and they're not comfortable, then find an activity that gets you all comfortable enough to want to chat and get to know each other better. It resolves a lot of issues. Sorry.
Yeah, I also find that having that meal time, so the way that I structure my games is we have game time, meal time, which is, an hour or two where we're just socializing. And then if we want to go back to the game, we're at a natural stopping point, but we can also go back to the game for as long as they want to go back. So having that food is so social for humans that I think that really opens things up for those connections and those conversations that normally wouldn't happen in a game. And when we go back to the game, it's always better.
Yeah.
So, jumping over to JP to jump into his expertise, how do you handle or how would you suggest you handle the separated bits when you have a significant other that may or may not be at those social settings? We'll say for the first scenario, they're not there, and then we'll do another one where they are there. What's your suggestion on that? How's best to handle it? And we'll say for the one that they are there, they're amicable.
Well, if you're in a social, you got to have your own life. Like, if you get lost in a relationship of any kind, whether it's, if you give up your personal space and the things that make you happy. Now, I'm not saying like having common interests and doing things together isn't healthy, but you still got to have your me time. If gaming is how you decompress and that's your self-care, then you don't necessarily need to bring your significant other or girlfriend or wife into it all the time. If it's something that they're into and it's a common interest and it's fun, then by all means. But so that would be on the side of not having them come. It's kind of the weight of and even if they're into it, they're into it, and it's a common interest, and they both have fun. But if it's something that they're doing to appease you, if it's a game setting, like the games, it's not fair to everybody else, because you got somebody who's really not who's probably just there to make you happy or be a part of your world or whatever, which is not a big deal every once in a while. But if they're there all the time, but they're not really into it and everybody else is, then it's not really fair to everybody else that's playing or that's passionate about it to have somebody who's kind of here nor there. They're not putting in the same effort, and they don't have the same level of interest in it, and so you kind of have to weigh those ups and downs. What's respectful and fair to the other people, and what is something that maybe stays as your time. You know what I mean?
Right. Okay. I mean that totally makes sense to me. On that line though, there is quite a few GMs and DMs, especially for more in-person games is where I've seen this more often than not. Is the relationship ban, right? Some DMs, hey, I got a follower. Thank you. Appreciate you. Sometimes we don't uh allow people to be in relationships, right? Or we have a high tier suggestion. If you guys are playing at the same table, don't date, right? Don't come in dating.
Right.
Don't start dating after we hang out for a while, because if it breaks or splits up, the table's gonna fall apart. And some DMs just can't handle that drama because it has killed plenty of tables over time. I mean, there's plenty of games that never come back because 2 of your 4 players got into a big tiffy because someone did something they weren't supposed to.
Right.
So, what are your guys' thoughts on that? The banning of relationships in the game. Personally, I don't care. You know what I mean? As a GM, DM, as a professional, and as a friendly player, if 2 of my players get together, cool beans. If they start there and are playing together, that's where we as a business focus a lot of stuff. We love having families play together. So having a relationship ban just makes zero sense for us as a business. But I do see that sometimes it can be an issue. On personal experiences and whatnot, it's happened, but it's never been detrimental into the world kind of things. So, starting with Liz, what are your thoughts on that kind of rule ban idea?
So my partner plays in every game with me, but I GM, so no sort of partner ban. A lot of our friends, because we're international, are also international and kind of come in couples. So if we kind of did that, we wouldn't have any sort of games to play in person. I have noticed that sometimes if there's conflict, even if it's just friends, it doesn't have to be a couple, that can come out in the game. And if you're skillful about it with their characters and with what you're doing, you can actually sort of diffuse that a little bit during the game. Sometimes they notice and sometimes they don't. But if there's conflict and you have to take a second and have that conversation with them, I think it's important to really talk about it face on and not put it to the side, because if you're not dealing with that conflict right away, it's going to seep into everything else, and that's when it becomes a table breaking thing.
So before I let anyone else answer, I gotta tag on to that because that's an excellent expectation setting thing, right? Because relationships do change, right? If you're not gonna ban it outright and say it's not allowed, yada yada, having those important adult conversations with your players as they're going on and be like, hey, you're flirting a lot at my table and it's not with me and I'm getting jealous. Or sometimes it is with me and I don't want to deal with it. But being able to talk to your players and see where they're at on things, whether it's their interpersonal relationships or their you and them relationships, is going to be excessively important for these table rules, right? Letting the expectations, we talk about this a lot in our stuff, is paramount to keeping a good game. All right, that's all I had to say on that. So I'm gonna let everyone else talk. JP, I'm gonna jump to you, and then we'll get Brandon last there.
I would, if it's a deal where I wouldn't ban it. Everybody's adults, and if they want to come as couples or be a couple or become a couple or whatever, that's life. But if you can have non-judgmental communication and be able to have difficult conversations, if you're running the game and you notice that a couple of them are, for whatever reason, right, wrong, indifferent, bringing outside stuff into the game or into the group or into, and the energy's just off, then you got to be able to just be able to communicate with the people and sort of dissect it and kind of go from there. I guess it would all depend on situation to situation, but open communication and probably setting rules that, what's going on while the game's going stays while the game's going. And if you got outside bullshit going on, then it needs to stay outside.
I like that. That's good.
if you're mad that if you're mad that they didn't pick the kid up at the right time, and you're been stewing about it all afternoon, like check it at the door, because that's not what you're here for. And if that's what you're going to be bringing to the whole night, and to everybody, then stay home. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Sort that out before you drag a bunch of other people into it, because nobody else is showing up and spending their time to have a horrid night watching two people fight over some stupid stuff that they weren't even a part of.
Gotcha. Okay, so
Mhm.
here's a question and a follow up on that. Would you say it is your
Mhm.
responsibility as an adult to take that step back, and purposely remove yourself from tables when you know you're having a bad day, or bring it up with your partner or other person ahead of time so they kind of like see where your head's at?
It would you would like to think that people could do that, and that more people could do that, but if you're not accustomed to doing that,
Mhm.
odds are you're just not. It's not even in your forefront of your mind. Like you're telling yourself that everything's fine, but everybody else is sitting there like, no, something's up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it'd be nice if people did it more often, but it doesn't happen as often as you'd like.
Okay, so again, kind of on the same follow up on this, because this is important social cue stuff, especially for GMs. Is it
Mhm.
appropriate for a GM to bring that up to their players, especially if they're not the other half of the equation?
If it's I would say that having open communication in any social setting is probably as important as anything else in life. Whether it's at work, your boundaries are your boundaries. Communication is important, and obviously, two people spiting at each other or something's going on to ruin the night is crossing everybody else that's there, their boundaries,
Mhm.
because they're not a part of it. They didn't sign up for that. They signed up to go and get babysitters or have their kids taken care of. I mean, they signed up to go out and let out a deep breath and have a good night and enjoy their afternoon, night, day, whatever. They didn't sign
Entire
up to
4 day
be drug
weekend.
into some. Yeah, they didn't sign up to be drug into some outside deals. So, you know, if you have if you can set those kind of boundaries early when you're starting the game and getting the group together and just saying like, hey man, if anybody brings in anything from the outside and it starts dragging into a night, and everybody's kind of having to deal with it, like I'm not above pulling you to the side and telling you to figure out what's going on and figure it out. Whether you need to go home or the other one needs to go home or you guys need to go outside and have a difficult conversation about whatever's bugging the one side of you. But yeah, and doesn't even have to be in a relationship setting. It could be just two people who maybe one felt betrayed or disrespected from the time before, and that they've been stewing on it for 2 weeks, and then now all of a sudden it's starting to come out. Like, if you're in charge or everybody has the clear boundary rule that if something's going on, it's going to be addressed by everybody, because it's not in the dark. Everybody's dealing with it already. So
Right.
bring it out in the open and it'll go away. But if you don't address it, it's just gonna get worse.
Right. I mean that totally makes sense, and I would have to also tag on there before we let Brandon speak. Is that it can apply for a positive social interaction too, right? You might be grooving too well with each other at the table, like y'all need to chill with the cooties. You know what I mean? You just take a step back and
Right,
have a
right,
conversation.
right.
So it's
If
okay
you
to
if
bring it
you
up.
if you're in a relationship and you're sitting there playing, like, yeah, you maybe don't need to go with the honorifics real thick and the constant touching and all those things. You know what I mean? Like everybody's there. Nobody's there to watch your guys' love story unfold either.
I'm there as a GM DM. I'm there for that. That's the best. No, just kidding. Brandon, what you got? What's your opinion on this?
There's not really a whole lot to add after those two just talked. They hit a lot of good points. No, truthfully, I mean, I agree with Liz and JP on every point they came out. I mean, honestly, it's all facts. And I believe that hard conversations, whether they like it or not, if they're at your house, they're online with you, they're at that game already. Them coming there already brings the problems there if they already have them. So if they didn't want those lines crossed to have those hard conversations, they should have just let you know, hey, we can't be there this week, or I can't be there, or this is going on. I do, to some people, if there's two issues between two players, whether it's couples, friends, acquaintances, whatever they are, if they're not ready to talk about it yet, before I kick them out of the game and tell them, hey, just give it a week, I give them an option to get it out through character.
Yeah.
A therapist that I actually played with before, 4 years ago, is the one who gave me that. Said that if two of your players are always having an issue, give them an option to take it out on each other in character. And I've only ever had to do it once. And lucky enough, it worked. It was with a couple. They were having issues that day with each other as something financial happened. And I walked up to them before the game started. I pulled them to the side and I said, look, I said, we can do this two ways. One, you guys can either just go home, take care of your differences, come back, when everything's settled. Or two, how about you guys get past it and we have your characters duel? I was like, in game, your guys' characters already had an out for each other because they're kind of rivals. They're both rogues. One was a swashbuckler, one was an assassin, and they didn't like each other because of the past each other. I was like, we can justify them dueling each other. So they did. And by the end of the duel, they were both laughing and hugging and they were just fine. They ended up making fun of it. Not saying that's for every situation, and I'm not saying that's for every GM to try, because it can get you into a bad situation as well.
Right.
But as long as with JP and Liz are saying, always have those hard conversations, no matter how nervous you are to have them. If it is your game and it's making other players uncomfortable, always have them, even if you know that you could lose that player, because it's better to lose a player and you can be able to fix that later than lose a whole game and not be able to fix any of the situations that you have, because I have done that mistake before for not speaking up.
Well, I would say even if you're just a player and you notice something's and something's not right, or two are getting at each other, or it's just, don't be scared to tell the GM and be like, hey man, you got to address this, because it's, like it's not 1000% only up to the GM to make sure that the game is going to run smooth and that everybody's having a good time. You know what I mean? And so if it's a situation where maybe the GM is kind of hoping it's going to go away on its own, or smooth itself out, get through that week, or whatever the case may be, a little nudge from one of the other players isn't out of line,
Well, and on that note, sometimes GMs are just busy not dealing with the personal side of things. They're worried about the numbers and how many goblins are going to be in the next room, and the silly little voice that they've been practicing all week so they could sound like Sean Connery doing something or other. Those silly
just
things,
for
right?
it to crack and make fun of yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right. Yeah, practicing doing your wife's voice all week long so you can be a funny character that is funny. Yeah, I've done that one before. Can't do women's voices. It's terrible. So, to kind of jump onto the hard conversation topic, a big bit in the TTRPG community is they call it a security sheet or a safety page or something along those lines, right? A no slip, whatever they call it. And lots of GMs and DMs use these tools to avoid traumatic experiences on their players. Us as a company, we don't necessarily have a official one that we hand out to people, but it is part of our interview questions. Like, hey, is there anything that we can't bring up because it'll be bad for you, so on and so forth. And then we have an open, hey, if something bugs you, tell us immediately so we can fix it or avoid it or retcon things or, right, being responsible in that matter. For your guys' industries, do you guys use something like that with your clients? Specifically to Liz and JP. Dweeb, you can answer this for your table.
Because I come from, the mental health background, I have a pretty big informed consent, meaning like we're going to go over everything that can possibly happen in our relationship as a coach, and a coachee. and this is what it's going to look like. And like, if you are unhappy with anything that's going on, please feel free to say so. If I notice something that you're not comfortable with, I'm going to bring it up, you know? So it's really important to have those informed consents and making sure that everybody is comfortable to be able to speak their own truth and advocate for themselves when something isn't going okay. And that's something that I really work on with a lot of my clients. And so in our relationship, that's something that they get to play out in a safe way. And it happens in my games as well. If I have people that I don't know very well coming into my games, I have sort of a little questionnaire about what are you comfortable with, what are you not comfortable with, anything that you would like us to like not ever talk about that might be triggering for you. And that's just really helpful when we come into the first session and I'm like, all right, guys, here's where the setting is. These are the things that are off the table. Please do not bring these things up. And then it you know, most people respect that. I don't think I've ever had anybody not respect that. So it's really important to help people stay comfortable that way.
Nice. Okay, jumping over to JP. What about you and your business?
I am. It's not like, well, so mine. I'm an advocate for healthy co-parenting, and
Yep.
I'm pretty upfront. I mean, I'm less likely to run into people that have like a lot of the same kind of triggers that Liz's clients would have, and the people that she works with. I empathic, and I can kind of get a feel for most people's boundaries and what are going to be hot buttons and this and that. But I'm also a pretty blunt and straightforward type of a personality. And so if I'm not your cup of tea, then I typically, I'll just be like, I'm not the guy for you. I'm not gonna push you down and make you feel like crap. But also I'm pretty upfront in the fact that like working with you as an objective person to better your situation, but really I work for your kids because the only one that's going to lose is the kids in the whole situation. And so like if you're looking for that rah fault, oh you reacted to them, yeah, then go to your friends because that's what they're going to tell you. But I'm going to look at your situation and be like, you're engaging, you know what I mean? Like if they're pushing your buttons and you engage and you guys have a 30-minute screaming match in the McDonald's parking lot instead of you getting in your car and going home and saying, I refuse to be spoken to like that. I'm not going to tell you you're in the right because you're not. You know what I mean? And so
Yep.
I don't have like anything, but I'm upfront with people and I let them, it takes a little while to get them to the point where they understand what their boundaries are and what kind of boundaries they need and how to hold those boundaries. And I don't push people's boundaries, but I will push them out of their comfort zone. And I'm not going to tell them that they're in the right if they're not in the right.
Okay.
And most people are okay with it, but I don't maliciously do anything to anybody either. You know what I mean?
I like to imagine we're the exact same way. We're gonna tell our stories and do our things up until someone has we'll say a very negative reaction. And if we do, we kind of address that in something that we call the after action review. We do that in basically everything that we do that goes over the good, the bad, the ugly. And if one of the ugly things pops up, it's something we can address, especially so we can play again in future games without hitting those keynote bits. All right, Brandon, what you got for us? How do you do stuff at your table?
So obviously can't give a really professional thing like they do. I'm just picking on you guys. You guys actually, I love your answers, and listening to you guys is actually helping me a lot. Online, there's not I don't really have a platform for online. I usually just ask people and that's it. But in person, I get really more in depth. Because I run in-person games because they're more private. I run kind of like R-rated tabletop D&D games. I put them to the max. I don't put. There's never rape in a game. There's only been one scene ever in one of my D&D campaigns where there was, and it was only because I knew it was okay from the rest of the players. And they walked in and they had to save this woman who got kidnapped by bandits, and that was like kind of a scene, and they saved her. But I always put out, it's a sheet of 20 questions. And the questions range from, are you okay with if a child dies, to all the way down to, are you scared of spiders? And I have each player fill it out. It's just a yes or no question. Even if I just get one yes that they're not, or one no that they're not okay with that being in the game, later on I go through and look at their answers, and I'll retype out a list of this is what you should expect in the game. This is what you know won't happen, and I'll print it out for everybody so they have it. So the expectations are already there. That they know, okay, let's say one person checked off they don't want to see kids die in the game. Obviously, you're not going to see it, but
Right.
so the expectation will be there that they'll see on the paper, okay, well, that's not going to happen. We don't have to worry about seeing it. I like doing that because, especially in today's day and age, you have a lot of the pronouns, and people can be very, and I'm probably gonna get some hate for this, can be touchy with that, or very temperamental,
Right.
from what I found. And so that's part of my questionnaire, is making sure that you follow those boundaries and you understand your players' boundaries before you go into the game. If you don't take that time to do so, you're going to cause problems for the game, for other players, and then for yourself. And it's just going to keep going down the line. So always have a checklist. Always keep things organized to where you know what your players would like, and including for you. Don't ever put anything in a game that will make you uncomfortable as well. I've seen other GMs do that where they think something will be really cool, but it's out of their comfort zone, and by the time they do it, they don't want to run the game anymore because they killed their drive to do it because they did a certain scenario. So always be careful.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, and I want to just jump in.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
I'll let you talk first, and then I'll throw my 2 cents in.
Okay. So I run Dungeon World, which is much more player based. So I have like an outline and, I run the game, but they do a lot of the work. So whatever comes out of their mouths is kind of what's in the game. So making sure that you have those boundaries set up at the very, very beginning is really, really important. I also run a lot of R-rated games. Most of my friends are, into that kind of stuff. But we've never had a problem because we talk about that first session, like, hey guys, we're not going to go this far, right? Please don't go this far. And everybody seems to respect that boundary. So it's really important for different systems to have, even more firm boundaries for things like that.
So to tag on.
Yeah, especially for something like, sorry, Rook, I'll let you talk.
Thank you. To tag on to that, something that you did bring up that is super important, you got to share it with your players too, right? It's important for the GM to know, but if player number 3 does not know that player number 1 is deathly afraid of any kind of spiders, and they're like, I'm going to be a drider because I love driders, they're going to have a bad day. You know what I mean? They're going to have to completely rebuild their character that they've worked a month on just, because they don't want to hurt someone else's feelings. Or they won't care and there'll be conflict off the bat kind of thing. So sharing those no-nos as soon as they come up and making sure everyone understands that, hey, this is a no. We talked about pronouns, right? If you have someone that is sensitive about their pronouns and can't take a they instead of a he or whatever, letting the rest of the table know that this is a hot button topic. Please be careful, right? And then addressing the players that have those issues and being like, hey, look, people are going to be people. As long as they're not being malicious, I ask that you forgive and forget kind of thing. You know what I mean? And that's okay to ask people of those expectations to be like, look, I need you to be a little forgiving because these people aren't trying to be mean. You're scatterbrained. You're playing a female character and you're a dude, or you're a female playing a guy, or whatever it is, right? I mess my players' genders up all the time because they play a mixed gendered character. You know what I mean? It gets me. I have to apologize all the time for that because I'll be like halfway through the story and be like, I've been calling you he for the last 10 sessions and you're definitely a girl. My bad. So, as a GM/DM, don't be afraid to ask A, for forgiveness on goofing up when you goof up, and B, making sure that everyone is kind of on the same page for that. So, not to cut the topic short, but I'm going to move on to our next question to kind of keep it rolling here. But we'll start with Brandon this time, since you've been last to talk the last couple times. So, fun other table rules. We talked about the R-rated a couple times, so let's talk about the gore settings that are okay in your guys' games and stories, right? What is a typical line that you guys draw for your stories? JP, for you, what would be a magic line that you would put up? Brandon, you're first. Let it rip. Where's your line drawn? Where's the sand? Is it the ocean?
So this is the one thing that we do a lot of heavy role play, and I even mean on my end for that role play. When it comes to gore, unless the players, there's really not a line in my games. I hate to say it, but there's not. The line doesn't get drawn until a player tells me there should be a line. Like, so, like as a DM, I'm trying to figure out how to put this, especially for player deaths. Player deaths, I told you about this house rule outside of this. I have my players roll privately to me their death saving throws, so none of the other players actually know what's going on. Some players really hate it. Some players really love this idea. But even though I had players that didn't like it, I kept that system because then it makes those players, oh, should we use our spell? Crap, are they living? Crap, are they dying? And then it sucks because I had this one player who cast Healing Word on this character who thought was still alive. They didn't know they failed all three. So they cast it and realized nothing happened. And in the scene, the big bad grabs his head and picks him up and lifts him off the ground and takes a dagger and rips his whole head off. And leaving the spinal cord. Yeah, and leaving just the spinal cord as the rest of the body hangs there, and he throws the body to his friends after he used Healing Word. So like when it comes to the gore aspect of it, some people might be grossed out by it. Some people, like I said, the children thing might be the line, I guess, because some people don't like hearing children dying or pets dying. But if that line's not there, I will go all out to gross my party out.
How dare you?
And I'll get into as much detail as I need to.
I've been playing
for that specific scene, and it'll get
that. Jumping over JP.
So that's my intake on it.
Well, I mean, I come from a place and grew up in a place where like we kind of anything went as kids, but my grandpa was a government trapper. We hunted my entire life, fished, camped, Central Oregon, rural Oregon, now rural Montana. I work in construction, do the co-parenting coaching. I don't watch a ton of TV, but I listen to a lot of Neil Gaiman books, and he goes into pretty detailed stuff in some of his books that's pretty graphic. But I mean, I get that you're probably emotionally attached to your characters and stuff, and so it probably makes it a little bit different just from that kind of standpoint, or you're emotionally invested into the game and these characters and what's going on, and so it makes it a little harder to stomach or to sort of intake. But reading the Witcher books and these and those things, it's still imaginary life, so I wouldn't think that I would probably have any sort of rules.
Nice. Okay. That's good to know, honestly. Jumping over to Liz. What's your take, Doc?
Yeah. Unless, like I said, unless somebody has told me beforehand, like, hey, not this, we kind of go into it. And again, the players, in a Dungeon World game are very, they kind of take the reins a lot. I had a game. So we kind of have some R-rated, some X-rated stuff that goes on in my games as adults. We had one character who decided that they were going to have a magical item that was a cape, and it was a sex appeal cape. So she got to like seduce people, and but if she failed her roll, then it all went bad and she could get raped. So we have those kinds of things. And she loved it. I mean, she played that with that cape so hard. And everybody was perfectly fine with it. And we had a great time. But if somebody had said, I don't want rape in this game, this is not okay, and she was like, I'm going to have this, like, we would have come up with different consequences, right? Because she was like, oh, this is going to be the consequence. And I would have been like, let's have a different consequence for if you fail your role, right? Just so that we're not making people uncomfortable. And it would have been fine too. So.
Okay. Well, I mean, those are great lines to have. So I got one more set of questions to go through, and then we'll do our little outro funness. So the other big table rules that people have really consist of like mechanical based, how rules are played out and things like that. How would you adjust to a completely different set of rules? So like going from GM to GM or table to table, what is your biggest takeaway or suggestion for people that are doing that transition to adjusting to those new rules? I'm going to start with JP this time.
Well, it's like anything else in life. You change jobs. You have to adjust to, my daughter's mother and I split up, and I had never been a single father before, and I had to pivot and find my new reality and create my new reality as a single dad. And you have to let go of, like, say, like a past game, the way that it's ran, that you might have things that worked well that you enjoyed from that game, but it would be like jumping to a different relationship. You're still bringing baggage from a game to a game, or isn't any different than bringing baggage from a relationship or a job. You know what I mean? Like little triggers, and just because you enjoyed it from this game or it worked out well for you doesn't mean that it fits into this new game dynamic that you're going into. And so having an open mind and not sort of being pushy, trying to turn your new situation or your new game or your new reality or the new community of players that you're engaging with, not trying to push them into being what you had. You know what I mean? And so compromise, give and take, communicating. If there's certain things that maybe you absolutely don't like, or that don't work well for you, then bring it up, and have the talk with whoever, and the communication, because maybe a couple other people kind of feel the same thing about certain areas that's going on, but as long as you can sort of take the emotional part out of anything and have a conversation level-headed and calm, and be able to just say what you need to say, but also be open to listening to what somebody else is saying back, typically you're not going to run into a lot of issues, or it's not going to blow up as much. I mean, obviously, like, you're not always going to find the solution, or it's not always going to be, bubblegum and rainbows, but
Depends on the system.
if you can, yeah, but if you can communicate, and maybe maybe it doesn't turn into something identical to what you had or what you're looking for, but maybe they can compromise enough to where it's not as bad, or it's not a huge deal, or you can work with it and pivot and adjust and move forward. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to be my way or highway from either side.
Solid advice. So GMs, I hope you're listening to that, because that applies to you just as much as any new players. Your new players are going to have their own baggage and experience, and being able to compromise to where it makes sense for your world and your table is of the utmost importance to making people feel welcome. So don't forget to do that. All right, Brendan, what you got for yours?
So I got something for GMs and for new players. New players, always window shop is kind of the best way I put it. try out a bunch of other GMs. Don't just do one. There are plenty of GMs who run very short games just to get people a feel. Find those type of GMs. Go through a couple of them before you decide what's your niche. Another good thing to do for players, and a lot of GMs don't recommend this for their players, but I do. Read the rules of the Dungeon Master Guide or the core rule book, and go in there with the understanding that those rules can be adjusted by any GM.
I need you to talk to
And make
Younger
sure that
about
you
this,
follow up with
'cause
your GM.
you need to talk to Younger, convince him into that last statement that the rules can be bent and changed.
Yeah.
He would argue with you
Yes.
right now if he was
Yes.
here.
Every rule, including addition. I play a lot of 5e. 5e, literally, the whole system was designed to be changed and adapted by every GM. Meaning, you can take out rules and add in rules as much as you want. It will never break the system. And I do a lot of that. Depending on the system I'm running, I will take out certain rules because I don't feel like it will fit the game that I'm going to run for these players. Or maybe I'm running a whole brand new game for a whole brand new set of players who've never played before. So I take out a lot of the complicated rules and make things a lot more simple. And then later on, I will explain to them, hey, this is stuff that could happen. And it's good for you. This is the part I have for GMs. If you do take out rules or you are trying to build a better system for players that you're not used to playing with, explain to them some of the rules. Sit down with them and have like a meeting about it. Don't be afraid of scaring anybody off. If somebody gets scared of the rules, then maybe they're just not a right fit. And there's hundreds and not thousands of players nowadays. Tabletop games has grown. You'll always find somebody else. So just do that. Kind of make a checklist. Let them know what rules you're changing. Let them know what rules could have been implied. And explain to them so that way when they do make it to the next GM, if they decide not to stay with you, they have they don't have as high expectations. They know things could be different. So it kind of goes for basis on both players and GMs. And for your veteran players, cradle the new ones, walk them through. And because I know a lot of veteran players who don't, they kind of run over these new players. And it's best that you guys kind of sit back and let them have the shining light for a little bit and help walk them through it.
Solid advice. I appreciate all of that. That's exactly what I would say. So, jumping over to Liz to finish up this question.
Yeah, I think coming into any new situation where you're not in your comfort zone can be really hard. Adapting can be hard. But we have to remember that being open-minded and trying new things is kind of the biggest part of TTRPGs, right? You're there to have an imagination, you're there to be open, you're there to play this character that you aren't in real life. So don't get stuck in a rut, right? And this is true for real life as well. If you find yourself stuck in something that, you notice you're doing the same thing over and over and it's not feeling great and it's not feeling great for the people around you, maybe it's time to be open to something new. And that can be scary for people, but I think TTRPGs are a great way to start opening that and learning how to adapt and learning that resilience because it's a safe space to do it. If, you mess up your character, if your character fucks up, it's, you're not taking out $10,000 of credit card debt, right? So it's a really good space to practice that adaptability and that openness. So I would say go for it. There's, not a lot that can go wrong as long as you're genuine and authentic and just trying.
That's fantastically said. That's a great way to end this bit. So we're going to go into our star guest little pitch time at the end here. So Liz and JP, I'm going to give you a couple minutes to talk about whatever you guys want to talk about. And then I'll do my little spiel and tell the people about the events we're doing, and then we'll wrap it up for tonight. So, Liz, I'm going to start with you.
All right. So I have just launched my coaching business. I've been in the therapy business for a long time. I'm kind of pivoting more into coaching. I'm also a yoga therapist. So I'm working with people who, are trying to get to that next level, people who are feeling like they're not worth enough, people who might be dealing with some chronic illnesses, trying to move forward in a way that is authentic and that feels good, but isn't, something that you've been able to reach yet. So if you want to look me up, global. I deal with expats. I've been an expat for a really long time now. So I can help you deal with a lot of those issues. Also, if you just want to, meditate or do some yoga, follow me on Insight Timer. I do a lot of stuff over there for free. And yeah, like to
Yeah.
hang out with people.
Website or anything like that?
Yeah, innerevolutioncoach.com. And I have all my socials under Inner Evolution Coaching or Inner Evolution Coach. So
I was going to say, we tagged them a couple times on our feed this week, so if you find our post from this week, that's where it's at. All right, jumping over to JP. What you got for us?
I have been coaching, working on myself, most of the stuff, the issues that I was running into as a co-parent was more me than the co-parent, which, any mistake that could be made, I was making or doing or all that stuff. And so it's healthier, it's less stressful, it's easier to find a common ground and be able to communicate and have open communication. But it all starts with you. You got to leave the pity party, as I say, let the relationship die and grieve it before you jump into something else. Quit engaging, be able to set boundaries, um, which is the three biggest issues that most people have. And then it should be more common for people that are raising a child to at least be able to be civil. And there's something to be said about being civil and not talking shit about each other or putting the other parent down, using the kid as a spy, using the kid as a weapon, holding the kid hostage if the other parent doesn't, pay their child support on time or do what you consider to be appropriate for them to be doing and these and those. And so I I help people. I answer questions. I read about 60 books a year on average about early childhood development, mental health, psychology, and whatnot. But if somebody wanted to reach out or has a question or see if it's a fit to maybe work with me and stuff like that, I do most everything through Instagram because I'm not a huge proponent or fan of social media. I don't really have a big presence, and so to me it's mentally exhausting and emotionally draining to go on social media a lot and do a bunch of these things unless it's for a specific person. I don't like getting caught in the endless scrolling trap. So
I feel
that's
that.
about the only place you're gonna find me is on Instagram.
Okay, cool. And like I said before, we've tagged him, so you'll be able to find his Instagram on our post. And I should have a link to it in this video for those of you watching it on YouTube later. You don't have to go searching around everywhere for it because I'm nice and add links to things. Uh, but jokes aside, gonna jump into our stuff. So we have a big event tomorrow. We're doing a pop-up, or not even a pop-up, an actual bazaar at Monroe High School for you locals in Fairbanks. It'll be a big event, so please check us out. It goes from like 10 to 7 or something silly. It's a long. I'm gonna be there all day. It's gonna be great. That's this weekend. Next weekend we'll be at the Bentley Mall for 2 days in a row, Saturday and Sunday, before Halloween. I don't think they're doing candy this year officially, but there might be candy there, so bring your chitlins. I think they're allowed to dress up, but it isn't mandatory, so if you don't have a costume, don't freak out. Our code for the month for the website to get 10% off basically everything that we actually sell is Spooky 907, capital S, lowercase everything else, Spooky 907. Thank you guys so much for listening. We really do appreciate you. I'm trying to think of anything else that we need to go over that would be important, but I would just say hop on our Discord and keep an eye for updates there. Starguest and Dweeb, thank you guys for being here tonight. I do appreciate y'all, and I will bid you adieu. Go ahead and dance to the outro music. Gonna have to dance as you go.
Oh, the drum.